Thanks to game developers and publishers having access to way more data in regards to player preference, lovable game mechanics, character archetypes, and everything else, it's rare these days that you'll get a big budget, mass-marketed game that doesn't knock at least one aspect of its design out the park. As an aside for a second, you can totally see how something like Horizon Zero Dawn benefited and was restricted by this general approach. It's an amalgamation of every major design philosophy of the last 10 years, all rolled into one. Uncharted's climbing, Shadow of Mordor's bow and arrow combat, Arkham Asylum's detective vision, all of these elements would have been playtested to death pre-launch just to ensure that the most positive reception came out the other end. And to be honest, it totally worked. I absolutely adore Horizon, and chances are you do too. Flashback to a world less dominated by social media and widespread data collation though, and you'll get all sorts of ideas cropping up, especially when it comes to difficulty, intended or not. Ranging from design challenge to just seeing how much a player would put up with, these days it's hard for any bad idea to now make it out the gate when a million past examples say otherwise. At least, that's the idea. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 painfully awkward video game levels you barely made it through. Number 10, Blood Trails, Max Payne. Look, I mean, it probably sounded awesome on paper, right? And then Max awakes in a nightmare. Traumatized by the reality of not being home to save his infant child, he's tormented by a trail of blood leading through the abyss, to which he has no choice but to follow. Sure, I mean, I can totally see what they were going for. Sadly, the reality of this Blood Trails level was one where you were literally walking a tightrope of blood through a completely pitch-black landscape. No amount of turning the brightness up on your TV or faffing with the game's menus would reveal anything because Remedy didn't code those assets in. It's a corridor, a huge intertwining mess of razor-thin lines to walk along and an exit marker somewhere. You walk, you fall, you get lost, you question precisely who thought this was a good idea. To this day, it's a testament to how rollickingly brilliant Max Payne was elsewhere that so many of us kept going at all. Number 9, Pillars of Hades, God of War. If there's one thing God of War certainly didn't need, it was a climbing section. Or rather, something that feels like it fell off the back of a C-grade SNES platformer, one where timing is key and trial and error mentalities were in vogue. Needless to say, this felt atrocious. Kratos' movements that were formerly used in this capacity to climb up straight walls with defined pathways now reconstituted to avoid rotating blades at a second's notice. The kicker? Well, if you get hit, you fall all the way back down to the bottom. Again, and again, over again. Yes, it's one of those kinds of levels. Games almost never do such things now, as the risk of alienating a portion of a mass consumer demographic is way too much. But in 2005, they just went for it. Number 8, Demolition Man, The Driver, Supply Lines, and Wrong Side of the Tracks, GTA Vice City / San Andreas. You have to hand it to Rockstar for doing so much with so little, i.e. taking the same engine from GTA 3, a game where the most complex mission was drive, shoot your target, and drive away again, then introducing huge amounts of vehicles and different playstyles. That said, in amongst this period, there were a handful of experiments that should have never seen the light of day. Stealth Section Area 69 is one of them, but straight-up controller throwers were Demolition Man, asking you to fly a tiny remote-control helicopter around whilst people shot you out the sky, The Driver, facing off against a literal on-rails opponent who'd flatten you for getting too close, Supply Lines, another pilot-the-toy mess with yet more gun-happy enemies, and Wrong Side of the Tracks, asking you to keep up with a train winding through a canyon from the back of a moped. The latter mission immortalized Big Smoke's line read of,
"All we had to do was follow the damn train, CJ."
as literally every single player heard it a good 20 times before completing the mission itself. Ultimately, it was a good thing old Smokey turned out to be evil, because man, it felt good taking him out after all this. Number 7, The Riddler Raceways, Batman Arkham Knight. To this day, I can't think of a plausible explanation for why what amounts to a kart racing time trial made its way into Arkham Knight. Because even after Rocksteady applied a liberal amount of spit and polish to the whole thing, the final product was dumb conceptually and awkward as hell to control. It is true that the Batmobile was conceived as something of an extra, designed to shake up the otherwise stale Arkham formula. But with that in mind, making us belt through underground racetracks with timing-based, physics-dependent obstacles was just annoying. Also, how the hell did Edward Nygma build these things? Where did he find the time and the resources? Why would Batman just go along with it rather than trying to find a way to mess with the electronic systems underpinning the racetracks themselves? Like, yeah, sure, he's got one night to save Gotham, but let's just take 15 minutes to go see what new hydraulics have been installed in a sewer. Number 6. Escorting Ashley, Resident Evil 4. Feel free to supplant this entry with your own personal worst escort mission, as there have been a ton in gaming history. First appearing back in 1984's Flicky, a game about a bird escorting chicks to an exit whilst avoiding cats, we've seen the trope of protect this useless NPC appear everywhere from GoldenEye to GTA. Here in Resident Evil 4 though, looking after Ashley Graham takes up the better part of the whole second half. The amount of times that you'll hear Leon shrieked across the room as random goons descend on her position, only for her to do nothing, is uncountable. Thankfully, Capcom did put in the animation for Ashley to duck if you aim her way, but it's a ludicrously small allowance of sanity in a stretch of game otherwise designed to be nothing but stressful. Most of the time today, you can add escort missions to the pile of game design tropes that developers just don't bother with anymore. It took us a long time to get here, but thankfully, I think they're all gone. Number 5. The tutorial. Driver. Driver could have been as big as GTA, and in fact, Driver 2 even pioneered the idea of getting out of your car for some on-foot exploration in 3D a full year before GTA 3. However, the reason it didn't click or sell anywhere near the same numbers as Rockstar's Behemoth? The very first level. Pegged as a tutorial that would assumedly separate the casuals from the true gamers, Reflections gave you a list of specific moves to accomplish within a very tight time limit, all inside a small parking lot. There were speed tests, handbrake turns, reverse handbrake turns. Just think of every major getaway movie, and this was the laundry list of what the professionals had been doing for decades. The problem, though, was that this was the first time we were getting to control a car like this. Not to mention the game's recognition of these moves was buggy as hell, and if you missed just one, it was back to the start to do them all again. All or nothing. You either got through this and made a name for yourself, or you withered away and never came back. Kinda like the Driver series over time. Number 4. Water Temple. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. One of those levels that person in the comments always tries to say was never as bad as you think. Even if that is the case, it was still markedly bad in the first place. If it wasn't, Nintendo wouldn't have changed it so much when they brought Ocarina back out on the 3DS. Also, let's be 100% clear, nobody likes underwater levels in platformers. They never feel right, rarely let you direct your character in exactly the right way, and ultimately only exist to provide a juxtaposition when it comes to finally getting out the water and getting a breath of fresh air again. So why, with all that stuff in mind, did Nintendo design an entire level around being semi-trapped underwater for a good 45 minutes? It was an absolute nightmare, and as I mentioned, Nintendo kinda acknowledged all this stuff when they remastered Ocarina on the 3DS, adding more checkpoints and environmental markers to highlight the way forward. Although getting through this original incarnation can be worn as a badge of pride, it's more like surviving a particularly horrific city leveling storm and then saying, I was there. Number 3. The Turbo Tunnel. Battletoads. The era of SNES games where trial and error equaled longevity and value for money is encapsulated wholeheartedly in Battletoads, otherwise known as one of the hardest games of all time. Not hard in any particularly skill-testing way, more just here are a bunch of obstacles that will wipe you out. Memorize all of them to proceed. This approach was everywhere across the early 90s, and here the amount of environmental hazards, jumps, and easy-to-hit objects that you had to navigate was nigh on impossible until you'd given it a good 30+ tries. For so many people, this was the level that totally broke them, especially seeing as the way that Rare programmed the obstacles to fade in nearly always meant that you did a double take as to which direction you were supposed to prioritize. At time of recording, we are getting a full-on Battletoads remake, but I am super interested to see just how much of this level stays the same. Number 2. Anno Londo's Walkway. Dark Souls. There are many disgustingly hard and ultimately cheap levels in Dark Souls history, and that's coming from someone who ranks it as one of the best games of all time. However, nothing beats the sheer F-this nature of Anno Londo's Archer section. Already taking place a hefty amount of time away from the last checkpoint, there's a stretch of this Anno Londo level where you're forced to traverse an extremely thin walkway as two archers take shots at you from afar. Get up the first walkway and you're then tasked with literally running headlong into the right side archer, meaning that if your timing isn't exactly in step with this NPC reloading animation, he will easily shoot you straight off that tiny outcrop you had to work to get onto. Fall and it's game over, but of course the archers respawn, and so do all the other enemies that you fought to even get here. Agony, thy name is Dark Souls. And number 1, Rainbow Road. Literally every Mario Kart. You know, this didn't need to go at number 1, but there's something about Rainbow Road's design that feels as though it originated as a practical joke back in 1992, only for Nintendo to keep going just to see what would happen. Granted, of course, it is possible to get a handle on each incarnation of the track over the years, but 9 times out of 10, just when you think you've got used to it, one slightly mistimed drift, mushroom use, or superstar will send you rocketing off the edge yet again. Here you go, the game seems to say, as you're continually getting pelted with red mushrooms and falling off the sides over and over. Have a star on us. Hell, have 2. Why do we fall, Scott? Why do we fall? Professional players have learned its many ways for the sake of being the best, but I can never shake the feeling that somewhere, every time a player curses their controls, their fellow racer, or just their own wrongly calibrated momentum, Shigeru Miyamoto is laughing like a madman. And that is my selection of very awkward video game levels that we just kind of slogged through, vying to never go back and do them again. Let me know which ones you love to hate down in the comments below, and please check out the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you soon.